Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zack, and for the last week I've been driving the 2026 Volkswagen Atlas Peak Edition. Up front is a 2.0 liter turbocharged inline 4, and down below is an 8-speed automatic transmission. Now I am super excited to be making this video here today because I've spent the last 7 days driving the Peak Edition of the Volkswagen Atlas. So we're going to be talking about its off-road attributes, as well as the fact that this is now the final model year of the first generation Atlas. For 2027, it is all new and changed, so we'll talk about if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But if you'd like to submit your own vehicle and have it reviewed here on the channel, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. And if you'd like to see all my videos weeks or sometimes months in advance, you can head on over to my Patreon for only $5 a month. But let's get back to that 2-liter turbo under the hood. Well, that is by far the most bread and butter engine that Volkswagen offers. Almost every single one of their products is offered with this engine in some form or another at some trim level or another. It's a fine enough engine, works well, and I never felt like I really needed more power out of the Atlas, so that was certainly nice. Like I said, paired to it is an automatic transmission. It's shifting and doing the job, and I have zero complaints. Last but not least about the Atlas, this is the 4Motion. The Peak Edition only comes in 4Motion, which is their all-wheel drive system. However, you can find other Atlases in 2-wheel drive if that's something that you'd like. How does it feel to drive the 2026 Volkswagen Atlas? Well, it's nice. It has a nice, comfortable ride, even with the knobbier off-road tires. I still consider it pretty nice. Visibility is good. Throttle response has been fine. Steering is a little bit lighter than I would normally anticipate out of a vehicle like this, but still a nice, cool, calm, collected driving experience, and that carries out throughout almost all of Volkswagen's current products. Obviously, the GTI and the Golf R are amazing, but even the Tiguan and Taos drive in very confident ways, so I'm happy to see that here. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have a completely digital gauge cluster. Now, a couple of things I really like about this. A, you get tons of color customization. We'll talk about that later on. But also, the Peak Edition does get a unique gauge cluster that features a above sea level reading. So it will tell you how far above sea level you are. Here in Illinois, it's not a very interesting reading to look at, but I would imagine as you're driving up Mount Evans or Mount Washington, or, you know, going on an adventure, watching that number climb has got to be really fun and special. So if you are a more adventurous person, that's going to be a feature that you'll love. On the steering wheel, on the left, we do have our adaptive cruise control settings as well as volume. And off to the right, we have our selectors for that gauge cluster screen as well as our heated steering wheel, our view button to switch the digital gauge cluster, and our skip track, as well as a nice little Peak Edition badge down in the center. Off to the left, we do have 2 climate control vents and our headlight settings. Leave it on auto, does a really good job. And moving on to the door, we have lock and unlock, power mirrors, and power windows. Moving into the center, we get our infotainment display. Of course, it has wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all that stuff. There's a couple interesting things in here. You can switch around the theme color of the vehicle. So not only does that change the gauge cluster color, it changes the infotainment color and the ambient lighting color on the interior. So it does have ambient lighting at night, and this specifically has the Peak Edition that lights up in front of the passenger, although during the day you can't see it. So it's actually sort of this hidden Easter egg that I didn't even know it had until the 3rd day I had it, and I had to drive it at night. I found that out. So that was a pretty cool little discovery. It does also have a backup camera, which I'm a little annoyed that it doesn't have a 360 camera. For $50,000, I think it should have a 360 camera, as well as the fact that this is the Peak Edition for off-roading, or soft off-roading, we'll talk about later on. It should have a 360 camera for trail driving or driving through narrow passages, driving off-road, at least a nose camera, and it doesn't have any of that. I also have the Kia K4 hatchback at home right now, and that has a 360 camera at $30,000. So, would have loved to have really seen that here in the Atlas. The other thing is the climate controls. So the climate controls are ran through the screen. Inherently, they're not bad. They're easy to use. However, it takes up the whole screen. And so if you're navigating somewhere, if you have your music up or anything like that, it completely takes over the screen. I was driving into the city last night with my fiance. She wanted her heated seat on, so while I was driving and navigating, she reached over, hit the heated seat button, and poof, my navigation was completely gone. I wasn't sure where I needed to turn because she was trying to also turn her heated seat on. That shouldn't be an issue. That is just an easily avoidable issue. Now you can use voice commands and say, hey Volkswagen, change my temperature to 30 degrees.
Setting the minimum temperature on the left front side.
And it will do that. However, I hate voice commands because I'm listening to music, or if other people in the car, I don't want to have to stop my conversation to try to yell at a robot on a screen. It's not the 1980s. Voice commands are not cool. They're not fun. They're not good to use. You know, I look at voice commands in cars like I look at the old clappers. Oh, clap and your lights turn on? Great, cool. Give me a break. Another huge complaint I have about the infotainment are the temperature settings and volume settings down below. As you can see, they're laid out. You swipe right for hotter, swipe left for cooler. Very, very simple and easy to use. However, at night, they don't light up. These are not backlit buttons. And so, yes, you can go to the menu and do it. Yes, you can use voice commands, but if you want to use the sliders there, good luck at night because you literally cannot see them. Very, very frustrating. Down below that though, we do have some hotkeys to jump to our climate mode, drive mode, parking menu, and assist. We have our hazard switch and 2 climate control vents. And then we have 2 USB-Cs and a wireless charger, shifter off to the left, power parking brake, cup holders that fail the big friggin' bottle test, cubby, center console, and seats. The seats are heated and ventilated. They do have orange stitching for the Peak Edition, which is a very, very nice addition and something that you won't find on other Atlases, but nothing too special. They've been comfortable and I've enjoyed them enough. However, speaking of seats, the Atlas's claim to fame is the fact that it is a 3-row SUV, so let's go do some backseat reviews. All right, getting in the back of the Volkswagen Atlas, we find a big friggin' bottle sitting here. And here we go. For the second row, my knees have plenty of space. I'm not hitting the seat in front of me. Similarly, tons of headroom. 5'11", not a small guy. We do have this giant moonroof up above us, which is very, very nice, but I fit back here very well. No complaints at all. And that is always, always nice to see in a bigger SUV. You'd be surprised at how many 3-row SUVs suck at having a second row. Not the Atlas. The Atlas is good to go. Down below, we also have our own climate controls. We're going to crank this down because it is getting warmer here today. Fan speed, which we don't need to be all the way up. Fan speed, auto, where to send it. Very, very cool about that. And then we get 2 USB-Cs and a wall outlet. Very, very nice features for the back of the Atlas. Overall, very nice space. The sort of seat style carries on back here as well. We have pop-out cup holders. Very nice to see that. And we do have built-in sunshades. Love to see that. And they also, there's this like nice little section for it right there. So very, very nice overall. But the true test is going to be the 3rd row. So let's try to squeeze back there. All right, let's see. So we do have this. Oh, okay. So that moves this all the way forward. And so you actually get a pretty decent opening, at least a decent enough opening for myself. And boom, we are in the 3rd row. I like that a lot. However, let's try to move this back down. Well, as you can see, not a whole ton of space. So this is where the seats were. Not a whole lot of leg room. They can be nice and move up. We do get tiny little cup holders. I guess kind of nice to see that. And USB-C. So I get 2 USB-C chargers right here. Very, very nice. But if the seat were to be back in its normal position, wouldn't have a whole ton of room, but we do have a 3rd row. And a lot of people want that 3rd row for when their kids have friends over or little niece and nephew come into town and you already have 2 kids of your own. So these seats work. They have the nice pattern back here as well, so that's very nice. Just don't expect to drive around a bunch of your big American YouTuber friends, because I don't love it back here, but kids will be fine. So something to note, it is a 3-row and it's nice enough. Let's hop out. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. Right around the back of the Atlas Peak Edition, and something I did forget to note is that this is actually based off of the SE trim level, so it's actually a mid trim. There are nicer trim levels of the Atlas available. So it's technically an SE Peak Edition, but There you go. You do have a button right here. It is a power operated tailgate, which is very nice. Love that feature. And once we're back here, nothing too crazy. Sadly enough, you don't get an outlet back here, and I would have really liked to have seen that. Now, like I said, you do get a wall outlet in the second row, but you know, a little 12-volt outlet I think would have gone a long way. Similarly, no power buttons or anything like that. You do have the folding of the third row here. So press this in, put that all the way down, click this, push that, and there you go. That is the amount of space that you get coming around here. I can show you that these also fold flat. Not like that, hold on. Okay, don't hit this one, hit this one. Then they fold flat, and as you can see, they form a pretty flat loading floor. Obviously, there's a gap, but if you have a sheet of plywood, a mattress, whatever, it's not gonna fall in between there. So very, very nice to see that. This is the rear cargo space of the Atlas. Nothing crazy beyond that. Nice, spacious enough, works well. Because it is the Peak Edition, I would have liked to have seen like all-weather floor mats or like some type of protection for putting a kayak in here, or putting, you know, your messy hiking boots. You know, it's gonna ingrain itself in here, and this is never gonna be clean ever again if you do actually take this hiking. And so again, attributes I would have liked to have seen. Pulling this up, you do get a spare tire, which is very, very nice to see. It's under this very, very thin cover. You have a jack and things like that, which is helpful. You know, I had a Genesis GV80 a few weeks ago, and it did not have a jack, which luckily I didn't need it, but there was someone on the side of the road that also didn't have a jack, and so I wasn't able to help him because I didn't have the proper tools. So the Peak Edition Volkswagen Atlas does, which is nice to see. So there you go. This is just kind of like a flimsy board thing. Hello? Oh, you gotta like slide it. Okay, there you go. Whatever. Come up here, single button to put the tailgate right back down. Nice, cool, and smooth. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and this color is exclusive to the Peak Edition. This is called Avocado Green. Kind of appears to me to be avocado that's been left out for 2 hours, but it is Avocado Green, and that is only available on the Peak Edition. So if you want this color on your Atlas, you have to buy this trim level at $50,000. Overall, I think the Atlas is handsome. I think it fits well in Volkswagen's lineup. Doesn't look too crazy or garner too much attention over the other models, but it still looks handsome and presentable. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving the Volkswagen Atlas Peak Edition for the last week? Well, it's been nice. I really do enjoy driving the Atlas. I think it drives well. It has good tech, has good feeling about it, and overall, it gets 2 thumbs up for me. As a car, moving through space and time, I like it. There's 2 things I don't like. First of all, that infotainment is not great. It is kind of frustrating to use when it just doesn't need to be frustrating. There are easier ways to do all of this, and Volkswagen has decided against doing that. The other thing I don't really like is just generally the Peak Edition. This is supposed to be their sort of off-roady, outdoorsy trim level to compete with like Honda's Trail Sport or Toyota's TRD Off-Road, or now Woodland trim levels, to compete with Subaru's Wilderness trim levels or Nissan's Rock Creek trim levels. Every brand nowadays has some type of outdoorsy trim level. Hyundai has XRT. And I have to say that this is a pretty poor execution of that outdoorsy trim level. I don't get a 360 camera. I don't get any suspension lift. I don't get any underbody cladding. I don't get any different differential modes. I do get in off-road mode, but it's not really that special. I get a cool color, some nice stitching, sure, but other than that, it's just not very outdoorsy. This is for people who can tell the difference between an oak tree and a sunflower. This is for people who own hiking boots, but they're still new in the box under your bed. This is for people that like driving by mountains and saying, oh yeah, that's pretty, but never driving up one or hiking up one or actually getting muddy or dirty. This is for someone that says they love the outdoors and yet they spend their afternoons doom scrolling on TikTok. It's just not very outdoorsy. I think the Trail Sport has a lot more pedigree than this. I think the Rock Creek is a lot more better off-road. The Woodland models even get a little bit more than this. I think this is just kind of slapping a badge on something, changing the bumper slightly, and calling it a day. It just feels like they didn't put a lot of heart or interest or really development into building an off-road version. So that to me was a little bit of a letdown. However, at the end of the day, I can criticize this car all I want. I can say they need to change this, they need to change that, X, Y, or Z. But the truth of the matter is that this is the end. This generation started, the first generation Atlas started in 2018, and now 2026 is the final model year. An 8-year run, which is pretty standard here in the car world. So until we drive the 2027, this is the end of the line. The final first-gen Atlas. And I have to say, it did pretty good overall, and still maintained that Volkswagen DNA that's found in the Tiguan, that's found in the Taos, that's found in the ID4 and the ID Buzz. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Volkswagen for letting me borrow their Atlas Peak Edition for the last week. Huge thank you to Drive Shop for facilitating the cleaning and delivery of this vehicle, and of course, the Midwest Automotive Media Association. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.